Now, when we talk about the second question, you see that is Mahatma Jyotirao Phule's writing and efforts of social reforms touched issues of almost all subaltern classes. So this is also a very important question, and it is also the question of 250 marks, means you can say 250 words, means 15 marks question. So now you have to make the structure of this question. So contribution of Jyotiba Phule. Contribution of Jyotirao Phule. So first part, your introduction part would be there, and then is contribution. And then limitations, and then significance. So you can break down the question into 4 different segments, dimensions. First thing is introduction, second is contribution, third is limitations, and fourth one is conclusion, means significance. Okay. Now, when we talk about the Jyotirao Phule, so he was the champion of depressed class movement, है ना? And depressed class movement is the part of socio-religious reform movement. Getting the point? So your introduction should be starting from that point only. So first thing you will be writing that the socio-religious reform movement, the socio-religious reform movement of 19th century, the socio-religious reform movements of 19th century, was a steer, was an intellectual and socio-religious steer, was an intellectual and socio-religious steer against 2 things. The socio-religious reform movements of 19th century was an intellectual and socio-religious steer against 2 things. Firstly, it was against the increasing westernization. It was against the increasing westernization. It was a steer against increasing westernization. It was a steer against increasing westernization. And second, it was against the evils of the then socio-religious structure of India. The then socio-religious structure of India. And among the reformers, Jyotirao Phule, Jyotirao Phule's contribution of great significance. Jyotirao Phule's contribution was of great significance. So this is how you can introduce the question. Hai? Now, when we talk about the Jyotirao Phule during the period of socio-religious reform movement, we find that his writings and his reforms, this is the question, writings and touch the almost all the subaltern classes. It touched almost all the subaltern classes, and this is the point where Jyotirao Phule creates a difference from the other reformers of the time. Getting the point? Because his movement seems to be more encompassing. After his movement, some other movements would be also coming, but that would not be more encompassing like his movement. So why? Because he touched almost all the subaltern classes, means he raised the issues of depressed class. He raised the voice of lower castes, and he also the raised of women. So, because women, lower caste and depressed class, all are the subaltern classes. All are the subaltern classes. Depressed class, women, and lower classes, lower caste, all are subaltern classes. So he, है ना, he wrote about the grievances, about the problems of this caste, and he also established so many organizations to raise the voice of these classes. So that's why his contribution or his writings and his reforms touched all the subaltern classes, all the people who are, you can say, depressed or who are not being given the due, you can say, respect in the existing system. So that's why you find that under his socio-religious reform movement, what he did, he wrote Gulam Giri. So write down, he was the author of Gulam Giri, a very famous text, Gulam Giri, which included the vices of all the subaltern classes, which included the vices of all the subaltern classes. And along with this, he established Satya Sodhak Samaj. Satya Sodhak Samaj. He established Satya Sodhak Samaj, which provided a platform to all the subaltern classes, means their grievances were raised from here. Jyotiba Phule raised the issue of social injustice. He raised the issue of social injustice, various types of discrimination, various types of discrimination. And along with this, we find that he established the first girls' school in Pune. Established the first girls' school in Pune. Getting the point? So, through his writing, through the establishment of this institution, he tried to include the grievances of all three classes: untouchables, depressed class, lower caste, and the women. And that's why the subaltern classes problems were touched by this man. Getting the point? Now, when we talk about the limitations of this movement, means the movement of, you can say, Jyotiba Rao Phule, so we find that the first thing is that his opposition, his opposition in the case of caste system, his opposition in the case of caste system was very strong, very strong. But women's grievances were not equally raised by him. But women's grievances were not strongly or similarly raised by him. It means that he focused more on opposition of caste, not the women related issues. So comparatively, this effort would be weaker than the, you can say, his efforts for caste attacks. This is one thing. The second thing, there was a conflict between untouchable and lower caste also. So this would be weakening. This would be weakening the organization. There is a conflict between lower caste and untouchables also. So this would be weakening the organization and his movement. And the third is that this movement was centered only in Maharashtra. This is another limitation. This movement was centered only in Maharashtra. This movement was only centered in Maharashtra. Limitation. This is another limitation because this movement was only centered in Maharashtra. So see, from today's perspective we see, but at that point of time it cannot be taken as a limitation because all the movements of the time they were region centric generally. Brahm Samaj, Bengal, Arya Samaj, Punjab and this area, and you can say, so therefore the Prarthana Samaj in Maharashtra. So but if we take like the entire problems of India of these classes, so its contribution was having some limitation. Now, despite of these limitations, some of the limitations which would be always there, when we talk about his significance, so he was the pioneer of depressed class movement. First thing, he was the pioneer of depressed class movement. He was the pioneer of depressed class movement. His movement was very encompassing. His movement was very encompassing. It touched almost all subaltern classes problems. It touched the problems of almost all subaltern classes. So his movement was basically more encompassing than the movement of Ambedkar and Periyar also. Getting the point? Because he touched all the classes. His movement was more encompassing than the movement of Ambedkar and Periyar. His movement was more encompassing in comparison to Ambedkar's and Periyar's movement. Because they raise the question related to depressed class only. Getting the point now? He is raising the question of women also, lower caste also. So this is more inclusive movement. And the first thing, another important thing is that he was the first to, come with the groundwork for depressed class movement. He was the first to come with the groundwork. Means he was the founder of this movement. He provided a foundation to depressed class movement, which was carried forward by Ambedkar and Periyar later on. He was the founder of, or he founded the base of the movement, which was later on carried forward by Ambedkar and Periyar. Okay, so 250 words, is the demand of this question, 15 marks. So you have to make a bit description also. Getting the point? So see how we are structuring the question. They are asking only contribution, but we have to also incorporate limitations, because without limitation there could not be organization, or you can say reformer. So always you come with limitation, but despite of limitation, significance and relevance is very much there. So 4 dimensions could be incorporated the answer. If you write only contribution part, it would not be sufficient, because these additional dimension would be fetching some more additional marks for you. Getting the point? Otherwise, maximum people would be writing this part only. So the structuring of question is very important. Now, next question. Next question is this one. Trace India's consolidation process during early phase of independence. Again 250 words question, 15 marks, in terms of polity, economy, education and international relation. Polity, economy, education and international relation. So it's a polity, economy, education and international relation. So efforts for consolidation. So it means that first thing, introduction part, and then efforts for consolidation, and then you can add some limitations, and then finally conclusion means you can come with some suggestions. Introduction part, then contribution part, and then limitation, and then suggestion. This is how you have to, and this question is like a repeated question. Many times they have asked, they have changed the wordings. No? Theme is similar, but change of wording has been there. So in world history and in modern history, we find that themes are repeated again and again, है ना, with variation in the words. Now, so what they are demanding? They are demanding that the efforts of the government in the early phase of independence, 1947, and after that, when the new governments will be coming, what kinds of effort they made regarding to polity, economy, education, and international relation. So this has to be mentioned by you. Now, when we think, so introduction part would be a bit more, you can say, challenging. So because see, introduction, there is no golden rule to write the introduction. You can start in your own way, but if you get some keywords, or you can get some quotation related to this, the introduction would be easier. Getting the point? So you can write here, there is a question from UPSC, that line could be used in the introduction of this question, that in 1947, India got the political freedom. India got the political freedom, but the socio-economic freedoms were yet to be established. But the socio-economic freedoms were yet to be established. The newly made governments were to face many challenges, in the initial phase of independence. But the Indian leadership succeeded to tackle the problems. And multi-dimensional efforts were made by the government. So this is the way you can start the introduction part. The challenges, first challenges, then consolidation. So challenges faced by the government, and government also succeeded to address the challenges and try to make so many efforts for the consolidation process. Now, when we talk about the political, you can say field of polity, so what was done by the government? The integration of princely estates. Take down here. Integration of princely estate was done successfully. Integration of princely estate. And then adoption of newly made constitution. And then the general election were successfully conducted. Administrative reforms were done. because now this administration is not the colonial, you can say, administration. So that's why there are to be reforms in the administrative setup also. So this is the contribution of the government in the field of polity. Okay. Now, in the field of education, so primary education was emphasized. Primary education was emphasized. Infrastructural development took place in the field of education. Infrastructural development took place in the field of education. And IIT Kharagpur, AIMS Delhi, IIT Kharagpur and AIMS Delhi, like institution, were established. Okay, so these types of efforts were made in the field of education. And then economy. So overall development of the economy was tried. Overall development of the economy was tried. First and second 5 years plans were launched. First and second 5 years plans were launched, in which agriculture and industrial sector were emphasized respectively. Agriculture and industrial sector were emphasized respectively. So you can say this could be important contribution. And then in the field of international relation, so you know Nehru was supposed to be the champion of internationalism, so he contributed a lot. So non-aligned movement, India contributed from the forefront in the formation of non-aligned movement. Basically the term was basically coined by Indians only. BP, Mr. Menon and Nehru, they played important role. So you can say these things. And then Panchshil doctrine. Panchshil doctrine was also brought. No, that would not be the part of international relation. Then later on, all other agreements would be also there. And then you can say, but still limitations. But as the problems were many. So they were to be sorted out. They were to be sorted out in the passage of time. They were to be sorted out in the passage of time. And still some problems exist. Still some problems exist related to these sectors, which are yet to be addressed. Because for many or for all newly born country, challenges would be always very strong. So all challenges could not be addressed. It will be taking a lot of time. Getting the point? So these kind of important points, some suggestion, limitations are to be there.